So as many of you probably already heard, and one of the reasons you're even clicking on this video, Betaflight has come out with release candidate 1 for their 4.3 firmware. What does that mean? So basically, we are at a point now with 4.3 that things are going to stay pretty much the way that they currently are, with mostly just minor bug fixes and little corrections here and there between now and the full release version. So that means we can start talking about things like tuning in a more definitive way for the rest of the life cycle of 4.3. Because Betaflight 4.3 was in development for so long, the developers really did a great job of making sure that they took a lot of the painstaking process of having to tune a quad out of the equation. And really, the defaults are pretty good for pretty much every flight controller. That's really exciting, but you can always get a little bit better performance. And I'm going to show you a couple of really quick, easy things that you can do to improve how the quad is feeling. And maybe you might like it, maybe you don't. And if you don't, you can always just go back to the defaults. But I would say give these things a try, fly the quad for a little bit, and I bet you're probably going to be like, you know what, this is a lot better than the defaults, and I appreciate it. And if you do appreciate it, give me a like, throw a comment below letting me know that it worked out great for you. If it's not something that worked out great for you, also feel free to drop a comment, and hey, a dislike, I don't care. But just let me know and give me some feedback on what you think, because I think it's important that we all try to help out each other within the community with really trying to improve the performance of how our quads are flying. I can tell you from experience that once I was able to kind of get my quad flying the way I wanted it, it really started opening up more skills for me, right? Unlocking a skill, for instance, because I had a lot more confidence in the quad. So give this a shot, let me know what you think, drop a comment below. So how do we even get Betaflight 4.3 firmware on our quads? First, we're going to start with the configurator. So let's go to Betaflight's homepage, betaflight.com, and a Google search should go ahead and pop up the homepage, one of the top options. Click there and scroll down their page to the Getting Started section. Here, now that we're in a release candidate, we're going to go to Betaflight Releases, click this, and this is their homepage for 4.3 Release Candidate 1. We want the configurator, so we're going to click on this link for the configurator 1080. And depending on your particular operating system is going to determine which one you're going to need to download. I use Windows, so I'm going to use win64.exe. Click there, download, and go through that process. Now, once you get it installed, we're going to go ahead and click on here and open this up and go to the Motors tab. And this is what really makes this tune work. We're going to be using D-Shot 600 and more specifically bidirectional D-Shot. You do have to have an ESC that can support bidirectional D-Shot, and hopefully you know that by now. If not, check your manufacturer information for your ESC. Let's go ahead and open up BioHeli32 and I'll show you the changes I make inside there. So make sure you have the battery plugged in, click connect. Your ESC needs power in order to be recognized with BioHeli. And we're going to read our setup and verify that we don't have any errors here on this page and click OK. Now, I highly recommend you change your ramp up power to 30% for a 5-inch freestyle quad. That's a pretty good place to be. 23 degrees of motor timing. And I do change the minimum and maximum throttle points here, but that's up to you. No need to really do that. 48 kilohertz PWM frequency is the thing that really matters here in BioHeli. I recommend highly doing this because of the fact of you're able to squeeze a little bit more PID gains out of your flight controller and maintain cooler temperatures on your motors. Now, people say that they don't necessarily like 48 kilohertz because they don't think it's torquey enough. They believe that they need to have more torque, so they're going to go with like 24 kilohertz. I would have to respectfully disagree. I believe that 48 kilohertz is more than torquey enough, especially depending on your prop and your motors that you're using. It's just better, more efficient performance, I believe, and it's set up to be, I don't know, it just works really good with 4.3. So give it a shot. If you like it, then great. If not, then you're more than welcome to change it back. Make sure that you write your setup to your ESC, and then you can go ahead and disconnect. So now that we're done with BioHeli, let's go ahead and get back into Betaflight. And we're going to be on the PID Tuning tab. And these are going to be some of the changes that I recommend right off the bat. Okay, so these recommendations come from me personally in my testing and all the different things I've done with 4.3 for a long time. I've been using it for about almost 4 or 5 months now. And I've been testing these different things thoroughly to see if I like them or if I don't like them. Dynamic dampening, I don't like. It has to do with changing your D values. I know it's getting too much kind of convoluted, but it just feels different, and I don't like the way that it feels I want my quad to feel consistent all the time. So even if I'm giving it a lot of stick, right? Stick left, stick right, forward, back, whatever, as far as roll pitch, I want my quad to perform the same exact way whether I'm doing it quickly or not. And dynamic dampening is supposed to be able to react to how much you're actually making those changes, and I don't like it. You're more than welcome to keep it. If you want to leave it at default or change it up, that's up to you completely. I don't want to use it, so I completely put it to 0. The next thing I'm going to highly recommend, and this is true for all quads. Now, in my personal testing, and I've tested iFlight Sedoras, I've tested Vegas Bandos, I've tested Impulse RC Apex, the normal 5-inch, as well as the HD quads. Heck, I even did this same thing on my Cinewhoop, but there's a little bit more involved with Cinewhoop tuning. But 1.4 in every single case, and mind you, these are all different flight controllers, different ESC setups, different motor setups, different props. In every single one of those cases, 1.4 was a good starting point in every situation. So I would suggest start with 1.4, and we'll kind of get into a little bit more what you can change later on if you're noticing certain things. But start with 1.4 for now. The next thing I'm going to go ahead and point you to is over here on the right hand side. I have thrust linearization enabled, and I have it set to 25%. The reason why I've done this is because I'm using PWM frequency of 48 kilohertz. If you've tried 48 in the past, you didn't like it, it may be because you didn't do this additional step, and maybe you did, you just didn't like it. That's up to you. It's a preference, right? You want more torque, or you think there's more torque from 24 kilohertz. But if you're using 48 kilohertz, I've found that I like to have my thrust linearization enabled, and I like to have it to 25%. This isn't just new knowledge from me. This is from a lot of other people in the community. I think most notably, Mark Spatz is the one who's recommended this in the past, and it seems to be working really great as well with 4.3 firmware. So I'd make that change. I also changed my dynamic value on this particular quad to 30. Now with that, the reason why it's 30 for this quad, this is my Vegas Spando quad that I'm running, or that I'm talking about. On my Vegas Spando, I use the Blackbird props, which are 4.9 inch props. And because they're a little bit shorter, I'm more comfortable with a dynamic value, idle value of 30. Now on my other quad, which is my Apex 5-inch quad, this is using 1750 kV motors, I like using the Ethics peanut butter props, and these are 5.1. Because these are bigger props, I use a slightly lower value for dynamic idle. I use 25. And basically, if you're using a 5-inch quad, right, like perfect 5-inch props, I would suggest probably trying somewhere between 25 and 30, or even 30 or 25, see what you think. Now, what you're trying to avoid is desyncs, because the whole point of dynamic idle value, in my experience in my testing, is I found that when I adjust this, I get far less desync issues with the PWM frequency that I've chosen, with the ramp up power that I've chosen, and later on I'm going to show you something else that I changed as well. But I don't get any desyncs whatsoever when I make this simple change. And that's why I'm recommending highly that you use dynamic idle value. And now in 4.3, they've made it even easier to use than ever. It used to be kind of complicated to use this setting, and it's one of my favorite settings that they've changed in 4.3. Now we're going to get over here to the filter tab, and these are going to be the things that I highly recommend to make this tune work. You need to have gyro RPM filtering turned on, leave the defaults 3 on. Dynamic notch filtering, leave the defaults. You are able to change these values, minimum maximum values I mean, based on your actual observations within black box logs. If you're not going to be getting into black box logs, leave the default settings what they are. There's no need to change them, and I assure you, even if you do change them because you're looking at black box logs, they've really done a good job in Betaflight 4.3 to not necessarily impact that much on the flight controller and all that PID loops, calculations and stuff, so leave it alone. D-term low pass filtering, I suggest leaving it on and leaving the defaults. Now, you're able to kind of move the slider if you want to be able to kind of change this, but I say it is not worth it. I think that for just about every quad, even if it's an extremely clean quad, leaving the defaults works really great. And again, it's not one of those things that's going to be so impacting on the performance of the flight controller, its ability to, do its calculations. You're not going to notice it whatsoever. The defaults work great, and it's going to help keep your motors cool, and it's going to be more consistent filtering for you with this particular tune. The changes that I do make over the default settings is I turn off gyro low pass filtering. Now, if you happen to have a quad that has terrible mechanics or mechanical issues, like really bad bearings, or maybe it's not necessarily the best carbon, or it's really beat up, I'd probably just leave those on. If you know that you've got a pretty good quad that is not noisy at all because you've specifically gone through and you've made sure like you're not using a really crazy long antenna or anything like that, you can turn these off and you will not have any issues. You've got the gyro RPM filtering and the dynamic notch filter to take care of the things that you need to worry about. So go ahead and feel free to turn those off. And lastly, the yaw filter is turned off because, in my experience, I have yet to find a quad that has a noisy yaw axis. And you're more than welcome to try this out if you want to get in your black box logs and look at your yaw and see also that it's not very noisy. 5-inch freestyle quads just don't have this issue. So I don't turn it on, I turn it off. It's one filter that I don't need to use. Again, the filters that I do have enabled are taking care of everything that needs to be addressed as far as filtering is concerned. And then we're going to go here to our last tab. Now, the big things on this tab that I'm changing are the TPA and the TPA breakpoint. I'm not going to go crazy into the details of what this does right now. You're more than welcome to read the tooltips and stuff like that. There's a wiki for 4.3 that explains it. But essentially, I'm getting more from my motors throughout the entire range with this setting, and I like it. I've changed it a long time ago based on, I think it might have been Joshua Bardwell's recommendation, and it works great. I have never had any issues whatsoever. And if you believe that maybe you're getting hot motors or you're having issues with motors, even though you're bumping your D gains up and you're noticing the trilling sound oscillations and stuff like that, maybe you can just stick with the default settings here. But if you're not and you're getting decent D gains, try this out and see if you like it. So that's pretty much it. There's really not a whole lot to it. Out of all the things that we covered, the real big takeaway I want you guys to pay attention to is the master multiplier. Starting out at 1.4 is a great baseline, I believe. And what you can do is go fly a pack, listen really closely to the motors, and see if you're hearing these different strange trilling sounds, especially when you're giving it like full throttle punch outs. And if that's the case, just bump it down a little bit, maybe 1.2, and see if that sound goes away, and you're good to go. Another thing you're also looking for, of course, is hot motors. But I assure you, if you end up doing the way that I suggested with 48 kilohertz PWM, you're probably not going to see or notice hot motors at all, even if you do hear the trilling sound. So definitely listen closely for that trilling sound. You don't want that to happen. If you're at 1.4 and you're liking it and you're not hearing any strange sounds and the motors are still really cool, bump it up a little bit more, 1.5. Most of my quads I can get up to like 1.6, 1.7 before I hear anything that even remotely sounds like trilling. So you could probably go a little bit higher, and I assure you the more you kind of increase those gains, the more you're going to get better performance out of the quad. It's something really simple you can do, and it's just one way to kind of better utilize all those great sliders that they've included in Betaflight 4.3. If you find yourself having any additional questions in regards to trying to get an even better tune out of your quad using Betaflight 4.3, please feel free to hit me up on my Instagram at MurdersFPV. I will do my best to answer any and every question I possibly can, especially in regards to tuning. It's something I'm incredibly passionate about. I love having a really smooth, great flying quad because I feel like I can do so much more with it, and I want you to have that same feeling too. I also try to be involved in various communities on Facebook, and you may already know who I am, so please feel free to hit me up there as well. But yeah, I'm wanting to help you guys out to have the same results that I feel like I'm getting from these quads because it's a lot funner that way. So hope to hear from you.